Alright, so I'm gonna go. This is a 61 Nightblade guide. This is part 1. I recorded part 2 and 3 earlier, but I need to re-record this one because it was a mess. I might ramble a little bit, but I feel like what I'm saying matters as far as playing the spec. So it is 61 Nightblade. I've had a lot of people ask me what spec I'm playing, so I decided to make this little guide, video guide. It's basically exactly the same as the written guide, but I'm doing a video guide just to show people how I play it, so they can see exactly how it's played. Alright, well, we'll start off with just the spec itself. I linked this in the other 2 videos also. I'll link it in this video also. This is the spec. It's a 61 Nightblade, 11 Ranger, 5 right here for Eagle Eye, Crit Chance, 1 Predatory Instincts, and then also 5 Wilderness Training, and then 4 here for Dexterity. Legendaries, we are going to go Satchel Charge. Does a lot of DPS over 30 seconds. It's probably one of the highest actual DPS abilities per global cooldown because it procs all the weapon procs and everything. So that's you got to keep that up. I used to not. I was playing it bad, but make sure you keep Satchel Charge up on targets, especially your main target. And then we got Hellfire Blades, of course. Everybody knows Hellfire Blades. Dusk Strike, you use that one. One of the main things about it is makes it. Well, of course, it increases your damage by 40% per stack for your finishers, and your finishers do a ton of damage, especially because of Dark Descent. So, Dusk Strike. Legendary is important, and also gives you 20-meter range, which makes it great. This makes it the spec super range ability under 20 meters. So we got that, and then Dark Descent, of course. 6 finishers, 65% more damage. It's ridiculous. So that's great. And then of course Razorbeast. Everybody knows Razorbeast, just extra damage. You put that in your cooldown macros. And then masteries. This one doesn't matter too much. 62 mastery. Reduce the cooldown of death from the shadows by 15 seconds. That's very important. Death from the shadows does a lot of damage. It also gives a stack of fiery spike, which is also great. So keep that up. Boundless energy. This spec is actually energy starved sometimes if you're not playing correctly. So all the energy you can always get is great. So that's important. Repetitive strikes is just better than everything else. So planar conservation. Here we go. We almost always use this, especially in my raids. I rarely have an actual like full chloro for living energy. So I always put up planar conservation. If you don't have planar conservation, or I mean, if you do have a chloro, you can use energy manipulation. But for the most part, planar conservation, because, like I said, energy. You need energy. If you drop below 50% energy, your eternal stacks will drop. So, I mean, you're totally screwed then. So, if you do have a chloro, you can do energy manipulation, and I put energy manipulation in like the cooldown macros and stuff like that, because if I don't want to swap my macros and stuff like that, just if we have a chloro. So they're in there, but it probably won't actually ever be useful unless you have a chloro, or it won't be useful unless you have a chloro. So that's the spec. We're gonna go over the macros. Again, I'm posting. I've listed all these macros in the description, so you can see those. But I'll go over them right now. This is the builder macro. Detonate's in there just in case you get out of 30, outside of 30 meters. Outside of 30 meters, Fragmentation Sticky Bomb is going to go and then cast, and then Detonate will be on top of the macro to detonate it, because it does decent damage, but you never really want to use it inside of 20 meters. So, like I said, 30 meters, but I mean, it goes up to 30 meters, but if you're outside of 20 meters, it'll cast that stuff. So you want to stay within inside 20 meters to cast your main builders, Death in the Shadows, Dust On, and Dusk Strike. You don't want to use anything other than that. You don't want to put Primal Strike or anything like that in there. So finisher, it's pretty straightforward. Blazing Strike, Flame Thrust. That's your finisher. This was my one button. That's the builder macro. 2 is the finisher. That's Blazing Strike, Flame Thrust. Blazing Strike, the melee finisher. Flame Thrust is the range finisher. If you're in melee range, Blazing Strike is going to go off. If you're outside of melee range, Flame Thrust will go out. Up to 20 meters. Of course, outside of 20 meters, you're kind of screwed when it comes to finishers. Alright, now Scourge and Satchel Charge. So I show Satchel Charge. If you're focusing a target that has the health like a boss or something like that, you want to cast the focus on that boss, because you want to keep it ticking on the boss. So I'll go and more in the rotation. I'll talk about this macro, but you want to keep these up every 30 seconds as far as the rotation goes. Satchel Charge, Scourge of Darkness. I put Death in the Shadows and Dusk Strike in here just in case like you're just spamming it and not paying attention to shit. So those are there just in case. So you actually are hitting something if you're spamming that macro. And then we'll start with the 1 minute cooldown, Living Flame. This is the 1 minute cooldown. This is your big burst. You always want to make sure you have 5 stacks of emptiness that you get from casting Dusk Strike. So you want to have 5 stacks of emptiness. So basically just spamming Dusk Strike 5 times before you go into this macro. Again, in part 2, I'll go into more of the rotation, but this is just the showing you the build the macros. So here it is, Razorbeast. Of course, it's just off global cooldown, free damage. Touch of Darkness, it does damage when you attack. Just another off global cooldown. Hellfire Blades, of course, you know what that is. I put Detonate in there for the same reason it's in the builder macro. And then Living Flame. Living Flame is great. It just pulses like an AoE around you. If you're not sure what this does, yeah, it pulses the AoE around you, and then it casts Fiery Spike also. So the cool thing about is when you go into this 1 minute macro, you don't actually have to have Fiery Spike stacks on the target because it'll automatically go up. And then Dark Descent, like I said, Dark Descent, you basically you get to spam finishers for 6 seconds, 6 finishers. You can just spam finishers. And then Blazing Strike, that's your finishers and your Flame Thrust, your AoE, your range finisher. If you're out of range, like I said, Energy Manipulation I put in these macros, but they don't want to actually cast unless you're using that mastery. Reliquary of Rage, it's right here. It is a permanent crit pot basically. It has a 3 minute cooldown and gives you the 1 minute debuff, so you can't cast another crit pot. But it has a 3 minute cooldown, so I put these other crit pots in my macro because I basically just use them whenever they're up. I get 2 every 3 minutes, basically. Alright, so that's the 1 minute cooldown. That's the big cooldown. I'll talk, like I said again, I'll talk more about it in the rotation. But that's the big 1 minute cooldown right there. And then Dark Descent. Dark Descent's the same thing. Basically the same thing as your 1 minute cooldown. But the Dark Descent cooldown is the 30-second cooldown. And the only things you take out of it really are, I take out the crit pots because I want to use them with the biggest burst, and they're on a 1 minute kind of cycle anyway. So I take those out, and then I also take out, of course, Living Flame and Touch of Darkness, because those are on 1 minute cooldowns as well. So this is a 30-second cooldown. Everything in here is 30-second cooldowns. Um, and then, yeah, I was gonna say I put Dark Descent at the top of the macro just in case I want to preload it sometime for some pulls, so I can just tap that macro and know that only Dark Descent is getting procced. So I can preload it just in case I want to. Other than that, that's my macros. I have the save macro right here. It's just if I'm gonna take a lot of damage, if I'm doing something stupid, I can pound this. I have it on a quick mouse button. So it's Twilight Transcendence, which is nice. Removes all debuffs and stuff. Reduces damage taken by 50%. Restores 50% of your health, but you do 40% less damage. So I macro that with a healing pot also, actually. Just like if I'm doing something really stupid. So that's my save macro. I think that about covers it with the spec. Trying to think really quick. I'll show my gear at the end of the third video, and because my gear is actually different now. I got a couple little upgrades and stuff like that, but at the end of the third video I will show my gear. Everything I'm doing in the next couple videos will be self-buffed, 100% self-buffed. I will be parsing on a raid debuff dummy for all single target stuff. The AoE stuff I'm gonna be on these 67 dummies, but they aren't raid debuffed. Also, a big FYI, I'm going to be clicking every single button just so people can see what my rotation is. I play a really strange. I don't recommend playing the game like I do. I play a strange hybrid of clicking and lots of keybinds. So I don't recommend playing that way. It's not really advantageous, but that's how I play and I'm used to. So that's how I play. But for the video guide, just for the sake of the guide, I'm going to be trying to. I click like almost every single macro and ability that I use, other than Ebb and Fury. Ebb and Fury, I always use it. Definitely. Even in the guide, I use a keybind for because it's off global cooldown. I don't want to. Where I have it on my bars, it's just kind of a pain in the ass even if I wanted to try to click it off global cooldown. So that's it for the intro. Part 2 will be basically just the single target rotation. We'll go over some range stuff. I'll show you the marksman parts compared to 61 Nightblade at range. Part 3 will be like the cleave and a nice little burst special thing at the end. So I hope you enjoy the guide, and if you have any comments, questions, criticism, everything, just hit me up. And I am Brazil, 2 L's at Fablight, if you have any questions or anything like that. So thanks and enjoy the guide.